Hello, hello, hello. A very warm welcome to all our friends, viewers, stakeholders, fans of Africa Rise with Susan West. It is a beautiful Sunday here in London, and I do hope that wherever you are, you're having a beautiful Sunday as well. And of course, today we will be going all the way to South Africa, virtually, of course. Our guest is waiting in the wings in South Africa. So as you join this broadcast, do the needful, which is create watch parties, invite your friends, share this broadcast, and of course, in our usual manner, send in your questions and comments as you may have them. If you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to all our channels, please do so. It is Africa Rise TV on YouTube, Africa_Rise.tv on Instagram, and SWOB21, SWOB21 on Facebook. But before I bring our guest on, I'm going to take a short break.
This is Emmanuel Malish. You're watching Susan Rise on African West. Keep watching.
I urge all of you who know what it means to be African, all of you who may not know what it means to be African, all of you who are on the journey of awakening, all of you who need enlightenment and continued support, to tune in to Africa Rise with Susan West. And to you, Susan, as a mother, I want to thank you for all the great work that you're doing to uplift us, to continue to engage us, to inform us, and also challenging us to engage in those conversations, difficult as they may be. You are taking us there. So Susan West, Africa Rise, keep up the great work.
Africa Rise with Susan West.
Welcome back. Yes, so I'm super excited to see you. So do the needful, invite your friends. Let's keep this conversation rolling. Dr. Taban, Dr. Emmanuel Malish Taban is a Sudanese, was once a Sudanese refugee. There is so much to. So I will be bringing it on screen now. Good afternoon from London, Dr. Taban.
Good afternoon, Susan. Thank you for having me, and thank you to your listeners and the viewers out there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So, your book. We're gonna set the premise of our conversation, most of it around your book, The Boy Who Never Gave Up. I started reading the book just a few days ago, unfortunately, so I haven't finished it. But in your book, I realized how all-telling the book is. All-telling. Every area you went there, you were very honest, open. You weren't really concerned about certain topics. And so as we start this conversation, I want to first start by asking you a question, which is, in the first few pages of your book, you talked about especially money from the sky. You talked about somewhere in Lokaround. Lokaround is somewhere in Sudan, of course, where you lived or where you were born. And the day you ran into, you were running errands and you picked up some money from the floor, and then you thought some miracle, some manna, the prayers your mother has been having, the prayers everyone around you have been having, finally have come to fruition. And then you realize, of course, how the money came about that you found on the floor. That brings me to asking, at this point in your life, are you still a man of faith? Go ahead and talk about that situation.
Thank you very much, Susan. That's very interesting. I think, that I remember when I was about 8 years, when I actually found the money on the street. And of course, I grew up as a Christian because my mother was a Christian, and I grew up as a Christian. Yes, I think in the past, obviously, when you grow up, you were brought in the Christian teaching about miracles. You are told about the wonderful work of Lord and everything. And I think for us in Africa, we always think that whenever you find difficulties, the quickest answer you could get is to pray and hoping God will answer your prayers and your problem can be solved. And however, during my journey throughout my life, I found actually that to be untruth. The issue that I think God, He created us in His own image. And if we were created in His own image, that means we can do everything that is capable of doing. Okay? And as long because that gift, He has given it to us. And there's a reason why He created us to be intelligent, healthy, with a lot of purpose. And that means when he given us a continent like Africa as our continent, that means it's His home, and it's up to us actually to use His God-given talent to make it a better place. And unfortunately, that does not require prayer. That requires more hard work, require more dedications, it requires doing a lot of stuff. And my issue is that so prayers alone will not sort our problems. That's why, I mean, if you look at Africa, Africa is engulfed in poverty. And that poverty is not because God does not like Africans. It's because I don't think that we're doing enough to work hard to develop the continent to be a prosperous continent, because God has done His part. As I mentioned in my book, He has done His part in giving Africa everything from a green, fertile soil to a lot of minerals. I mean, you look at Nigeria, oils, you look at South Sudan, oil and everything. But the issue is that we need to use those resources to develop our own people. And I think that's where we Africans, we tend to misunderstand that actually if you pray, God will answer. Unfortunately, God will not answer you because He already given you a gift to use it. How can you ask for something that while you're having something that you haven't used? So for me, yes, I do believe in God, but I don't believe that He will throw a bread from heaven to me. I need to work together to make that bread. I need to work to care for my children, to educate my children. If I don't do that, unfortunately, all of them will suffer because of my weakness. So it's got absolutely got nothing to do with God.
That is profound, and I just want to thank you that you expressed it the way you did. You're still a man of faith, of course, but manna doesn't fall from heaven. We as Africans are shackled in our minds, most of us, thinking that all we need to do is prayer, and somehow miraculously things will change, and we're not doing enough to change our circumstances. I want to go on to talking about, in your book, somewhere in page 19, you gave a rundown of how you used to take your goats to graze.
Yes.
And then you were very young, of course, with your siblings, your cousins, and so you would then try very hard to keep these goats from going into other people's farm, so that it doesn't cause some kind of confrontation or trouble. You know, when I read that part, I realized how long ago this problem we face in Nigeria presently is, as to open grazing, the herdsmen situation in Nigeria that is causing a lot of havoc. Go ahead and talk to us about your experience as a child and taking your goats to graze, and the experiences and the consequences, and how it relates to present day development of Africa.
You know, I think grazing in Africa has been a big problem for generation to generations, and we actually lost a lot of many people because of this grazing issue. Currently in South Sudan, every week a community is murdered, children are displaced, women are raped because of the grazing issue. So yes, during that time we were taught, because I mean it really makes sense that if you're going to be having goats, you have to look after them. You cannot make them wander around. The reason that it's not just a goat, it's got a monetary value. It's worth something, you know. So it means when you have goats in South Sudan or cows, you're supposed to be a rich man. But to be a rich man means you must look after your resources. And And that's, I think that's been a major issue in Africa, because people have cows and they go around causing dispute with their neighbors and result in unnecessary killings. Okay, so when I grow up, it was our duty as boys to check the children, to take the goats to the grazing area, and you have to make sure that you tie them properly in the tree. And they come 1 o'clock, you must go and take them to a place where they can get more food, and that's how it is always been done. You know, and of course, if it goes to the children to the neighbor farm, then of course you will have a big dispute with the neighbor, and most of the time create a lot of chaos. You know, they come and there's a lot of fight, which is very unnecessary. And that's unfortunate. That's, as I mentioned, alluded to the fact that that's what's been happening in South Sudan. So the question is that I think the reason that I think as Africans, we have not evolved. Goats, cows is not the first thing that happened in Africa. You go to China, there are goats, there are cows. You go to Europe, there's goats and cows. You go to America, it's exactly the same. But the difference is that there's a control in the way how you actually should be grazing your goats. Your goats cannot be roaming around in the street like in Juba or in cities like Nigeria. This is very unnecessary. I mean, the goats belong to them, to their kraal, and supposed to be feeding the kraal. And if you're gonna have a goat, you must look after them. It's just like having kids. If you're gonna have children, you must look after your children. You cannot have make them wander around and steal or eat other people's properties. It's not necessary. So for me as an African, you know, this goat thing, I mean, it's something that I needed to mention, because I mean, South Sudan, we're losing a lot of people because people failure there because they try to protect their livestock. Unfortunately, those livestock are cause of problem in Africa, and they shouldn't be. And that's because of the lack of educations, and we never evolve as Africans. We tend to be, we're stuck still in the past. You know, I mean, there are a lot of universities, but nobody actually create a system to make sure that you can have your goats, but you don't need to have your goats to wander around the city to fight for the same right of the way with the cars and bicycle and other things. It's not necessary. And that was unfortunate part that I mean, when I grew up, we have control, but nowadays there's no control, and everybody think that they have rights for their goats to be in the middle of the city, or you can kill someone because someone got stolen your goat and something like that.
Right. You know, and now I want to go to, I know how candid you were in your descriptions of your growing up and experiences in Sudan. Just bring us up to speed a little bit from when you were born and all the way to when you were left alone with your mom and your mother going ahead to having other children by other men. And one of the things that struck me is that your mother's experience is an experience that many African women can relate to. You know, especially when it comes to Kennedy's father, Sarah's father, and your father. Just take us through that period of your life.
Yeah, it's actually, I think if I think about my mother, I mean, she was a very intelligent woman, but I mean, she made a mistake. And one of the mistakes was to get married at the age of 17 without actually maybe making a proper informed decisions, and without even having any kind of sort of education. So in Africa, we think that we marry for love, but unfortunately, that's probably the reason for our destruction as Africans. So she got married at the age of 17. Obviously, when they were in Uganda and refugee camp, they had about 3 of my siblings, and they moved to South Sudan. And my father used to be a truck driver. And I think as mostly people in Africa, you know, we get obsessed with what we call yellow bone. That was a story I was told around the evening fires, that he met someone who was very light in complexion. So he started having affairs, and then as a result, he left my mother for her. And I think he was abusing my mother while my mother was pregnant with me about 6 months. So they divorced. And of course, now once he divorced, my mother was left with 4 kids to feed them by herself as an individual. So at that time, of course, I was a fatherless child. And we moved to a small village called Lokaround. That's where we spent our time there. But then the problem that I think my mother, of course, looking after 4 kids while you're not working, she was working as a secretary at one of the local schools, earning less. And of course, for every other woman, you wanted to find someone to share the responsibility with, and as women, sometimes the very women, some can be naive because they think that maybe if they find someone else who could look after her 4 kids, because it's your kids as a woman. It's never my, I say, if you have a kids with you, you're gonna take this little kids, but I could move on with my life. And that's what had happened to my father. My father has moved on and left us with my mother. And my mother wanted to find someone to share the cost of raising us up. And that's when she made her first mistake, and she met one of the teacher, and she fell pregnant. And I remember, I think my brother Kennedy, when he was born, I think I was about 6 years old. And he was born, I witnessed everything because I was very young. I was standing there with my shorts, and when he emerged out, and it was very sad. She was screaming, she was having a lot of pain. And it's something that was really, really, I thought it was really cruel. I still got the image up to now in my head. And then of course, Kennedy was born, and then 3 months later, the teacher disappeared because he was married somewhere else. He got a family. And I witnessed the same story in South Africa, where people that come to work in the mines, they're having wives at home, and then they start having children around wherever they're staying. And one of my patients last week actually got 16 kids with 5 different women. It's crazy. So of course, when my mother fell in pregnant with a Kennedy was born. Then 2 years later, 2 to 3 years later, she made again the same mistake. My sister was born with different father. So now instead of having four mouths to feed, now there are 6. And all the men, they all run away. And that's a sad reality about Africa. So we are left to be looked after a woman who hardly can earn, uneducated, that could only sell tea and bread on the street. And that's for me, that was for me, it was the biggest problem. And I always, and I think during the course of my journey to where I am today, I always promised myself one thing. If I would suppose to have problem with my wife, I'll give her everything that I have, because I would never want to have my children to go through what I have gone through. And throughout my life, I really wish that I had a father who could have stand there for me. But look, I never have one, but at least I have opportunity now to be a father for my daughters. And I want to make sure that they should have a best life. And I don't want to have my wife to feel that she made a mistake for us to have the kids, because we know what men do in Africa. We don't take responsibility for our offspring. And I think something that we shouldn't be questioning about it. It should be a primary responsibility of every man to make sure that you have to look after your offspring. You need to give them education. If we have to move this continent forward, it's about we taking responsibility for our offspring and our generation. It's very important. And I think my mother fell into that. And unfortunately, that, yes, I need to describe it. And I want a lot of women to learn from it. It's not, again, it's the women that have control over their fertilities. So now, if you decide to fall pregnant because somebody who promised you the world and out of blue run away, you're going to get stuck with a baby like my mother. And unfortunately, your children will go through the same suffering that I've went through. And that's really what I wanted people out there across Africa to understand, where our problems originate. Until we correct all these problems, unfortunately, Africa will always be a dark continent. And with all our children ending up on the roads, to dying on the sea, going to looking for greener pasture. And that's that reality.
Right. When you mentioned until we change that, Africa will remain a dark continent, it was profound. It was profound in the sense that whenever you hear the term the dark continent, people cast their minds back to the complexion of the people. But it's not really about the complexion of the people.
No.
It's the way we have chosen not to take advantage of our natural resources to our advantage and waiting for some kind of miracle all the time to fall from the sky. I want you to also touch on when I read about a studious boy, when you talked about your paternal aunt, who was quite a bit fond of you, but was strangled to death by her husband in a fit of rage. Go ahead and take us through those moments of your life and the abuse that women face in African cultures. Is it a cultural embedded thing, or is it because it's a chauvinistic society, or is it just the misogynistic thing of a particular kinds of men that we breed in Africa?
I think number one, I will tell you that Africa is a lawlessness continent. That's our major problems. The law is being applied selectively. The law only applies to those who have nobody in the leadership. The moment you have a friend or a neighbor in leadership, you can get away with everything. So going back to my aunt, she was a nurse, and she was always fond of me, and she will come with a bicycle, and I'll always after she came brought me bread. When she riding back, I will run after her for a kilometer or two until I'm tired, then I'll come home. And one of the I think she have an argument with one of the husband actually. They have an argument, and they fought, and he killed her, and she was found hanging, of course, with a bruise all over the head, and the husband ran away. And of course, in South Sudan, I think I remember that the husband, he walked freely because no action whatever was taken. And I think that was really very sad because you just eliminated life of helpless woman. And I mean, if you look today in Africa, you've seen, not long ago, 300 young girls were abducted by Boko Haram. I mean, think about it, to be their wives at young age. What kind of savage is these people? Let's be honest. What kind of savage are we dealing with? Nobody say you cannot find a wife. You can find a wife, but find a mature wife, somebody who could match your mental maturity. That's a reality. And violence against women. I mean, we've seen in South Africa where rape is being used against women, as a weapon of oppression in Africa, and violence has always been the key where women are suppressed. And the question that, if you look at all these women, they raise these poor men. Those men are born of a woman. But then they turn against the same women that raise them up. And the reason and most of this, because our society is broken. We grow up in some broken societies, whether in Nigeria, whether in South Africa, wherever you are in East Africa, because we don't spend enough time with our children. We don't raise them up properly to become a man. We don't do that. We believe in Africa, if you're violent, you tend to be very strong. And if you look at across Africa, violent men become the leaders of society. You just need to murder so many people, then you become a leader of society, and you are given a red carpet. And that unfortunately promote our predicament in Africa. Until we change that, it's going to be difficult. I've seen in South Sudan, who suffer the most when there's violence? It's women, the children. It's always the same. And the same men that suffer as a children age, when they become adult, they repeat exactly the same violence. Now the question that, what is wrong with us African in our mentality? Let's be honest, what's happening? Do we have amnesia? The fact that we cannot remember what had happened to our previous generations? For sure, there's something that we have to you have to explain. And that's why you find that in Africa, I say today, if Africa is rich in terms of religion, do you know why? Because everybody's suffering. So now they can't believe in the leaders themselves. They have to believe in power unknown. That's why every African turns to God, hoping that they will get miracles. Unfortunately, miracle won't come from there. We have to change. We have to speak freely. And I think for me, as an African, I think too many times we given credit to the West, Chinese, Indians for our problems. while we created those problems ourselves. Maybe it's time that we actually take responsibilities and start accepting that we made the mistakes. Because if we accept that we made a mistake, then we can autocorrect. And once we start working on our own problem, then it's easier for us to be able to relate to the other people without blaming them for our problems.
Right. You know, in a society like Africa with too many problems, in your book, let me quote you where you said alcohol might numb the pain of poverty in the short term, but in the long term, it merely increases the problem. So I want to ask you, many children exposed to alcohol and of course such hardships will eventually become that which they disdain. What made you different from the rest of the men in Africa, or the kinds of men in Africa? Because like you mentioned, these men who become abusive, commit crime and violence, experienced this same thing growing up or as children, but then they end up becoming the same thing that they didn't like. Growing up in an environment where you saw a lot of people drinking their problems away, or thinking that they're drinking their problems away, and they're, all sorts of drunk people around you there. What made you, what was the thing that made you turn out to be a different breed?
I think the most important thing that probably changed my life was that I got opportunity to get exposed to different cultures. And I think that probably is very important in my development, because I think grow up in South Sudan with my mother, and then spending a few years, of course, on the street of Addis Ababa, Nairobi, and Mozambique. And then, of course, when I got taken in with the Comboni missionaries, who are Germans and Italians. And what I figured out that with these missionaries, they had alcohol in the house. But in the evening, during dinner, they'll take a bottle of beer, and that's all they drink. In contrary, when you go to an Africans, when there's a box of alcohol, they only leave when the box is empty.
Mm.
If the box is not empty, the party continues. And I've seen the same habit, of course, in South Africa, where people drink from Friday to Sunday. Mm. The question is that I always wanted to know what will happen to me if I do my best in my work, if I study harder, if I work harder, 14, 16 hours a day, and if I don't intoxicate myself, what happened? Mm. And that's always been my obsession, to see, will I be the best? And what obsessed me was, because toward the end of my book, I did mention that I've went to America, I've written exams, and I did very well. I went to Europe, I did exams, I did very well. So my argument is that Africans are not inferior to the Europeans. Africa are not inferior to Chinese. But what probably, once you come back to Africa, you find that you're unable to do a lot of things, because everybody follow what others do. Okay, so in my case, I have a choice to drink, but I didn't see a need for that. Drinking does not make you a man.
Mm.
I mean, consuming things that are toxic to your body does not make you a man. I could have a glass of wine, that's fine. But why should I drink to such an extent that I start behaving like an animal? I've seen the impact of alcohol during my mother, when she was selling alcohol, people drinking and falling down. They destroy their family. I don't want to do that to my family. I want to be I need to be an example to the next generation, to say that, listen, you can have fun without drinking. You can be a responsible citizen without drinking. You can go to party without drinking. So we misunderstood the concept of alcohol. So in Africa, alcohol is not a problem, but we are the problems, because alcohol is found everywhere in the world. Not everybody end up being drunk like people in Africa and being unproductive. So in Africa, I think people are not productive enough. So they spend a lot of time drinking, thinking of crazy ideas. But the moment that productivity become the ones that people are very productive, you find that they become more, maybe they'll spend less time drinking alcohol. But I think most of the people in Africa that drink alcohol is born out of frustration. And in my mind, I refuse to get frustrated. Frustration results when you don't use your mind maximally to full capacity. And I refuse to do that because I think I can do better with my mind. And alcohol is not one of them.
Right. Absolutely agree with you. You know, I quickly recognize Glory Grace Shannon, welcome. David Philip Barango, Rahina Bello, greetings. Theodora Igwe, Helen D, all the way from the United States of America. Welcome, you guys. And I can see your comments. Education was very important to you, extremely important to you. That you did mention in your book, when you finally came back to look around and you were put to go to a school that had, a little bit, most of the children there were children of the elites of your society, and you were there. I think it was a Catholic school.
Yes.
And thank goodness you said you were not forced to become a Catholic to attend that school. But even if it meant that you had to change your religion to attend that school, you would have. Take us through those moments. Why did you realize at a tender age the importance of education?
I think you know what? I think education for me is always, learning new things for me is always very interesting. And of course, even learning how to speak English, that was awesome for me. I enjoyed it. But I think if you remember, if you look at most of the countries across the world, education is very important because it's allowed the child mind to develop. It's allowed you to be asking questions, allowed you to take steps. If I didn't have education, today I'll be probably dead. That's the reality. Or I could have been a murderer in South Sudan, or been a child soldier, or could have been just a villager with the goats, maybe 5, 6 goats. That's what without education. So education for me is a key thing in Africa. If you have to develop Africa, every child needs to go to education. Every child needs to go to school. And if you remember, most dictators in Africa, the first thing what they do is destroy education. If you destroy education, you can control everybody because you take their ability to think. They can't think anymore. Means they only consume what you tell them. And that's a sad reality about South Sudan or country like Nigeria with those children being abducted. Because you deprive child of education, you actually take out their dignity away from them. They become nobody. No matter how intelligent you are, if you have no education, you will not be able to articulate your message. You won't be able to do anything. And that's what distinguishes the continent from the rest of the country, the rest of the continent, is the fact that we never focus for quality education for our children. So education for me is very important. But again, if you're going to have education without a skill, it's also useless. You're going to have like 100 certificates in the world, degrees, but if you cannot do anything, it's a waste of time. You should be able to use that education to better your own future. So I knew that from a young age because I've seen most of the people that you used to be, that their children come to our school. I mean, they wear nice clothes, they dress, the kids wear nice shoes, they having bread, the butter, and everything. And I didn't have any of them. They having school bags. I never had any of the above because their fathers were ministers, they were doctors, they were engineers. So for me, that's when I knew that because I was a fatherless child and my mother was uneducated, the only way that I could be able to one day to have a better generation was to get education. And I did enjoy school at that particular moment because I was always in top 2, top 3 in the class. And I think for me, it means quite a lot. But I remember that even like during the the end of the year function, I'll be on number 1 in the class. But the minister's kids, of course, they will never be in top 10. So that made me proud, because I could do things that they couldn't do, despite them having everything that they have. Yeah. So for me, I actually, even when I started advocacy to start a basic education for children, that's always been my passion, that every small child need to get education. That's have to be a basic human rights, that they need to get education. No other, it's even not for negotiation. They need to be given education. That's important.
Right. You know, it is absolutely true that education is what eventually will free and, you know, liberate Africa much more. Because when you're communicating with people that are not that don't rely on some kind of translator or someone else to translate to them what you're saying, then what I would call lost in translation does not happen. Because a lot of times in Africa, you have good intentions, you go to your locality, you want to pass on a message, but because you don't speak the language, or they don't understand the language you're speaking, someone with not so good intention, or someone who is not who is not qualified enough, or not able to give proper translation, will give a totally different message, and there we have it. There is total miscommunication, and there is problems. I want to ask you, the curse of your grandfather. The curse of your grandfather. I didn't ask you from the beginning if you're a man of faith still, now that you know that manna doesn't fall from heaven, and all the prayers that your mother had is not the reason why you found that chunk of money on the ground, but because some drunk men had a fight the previous night that you could hear from your little heart. And so they must have lost that money, and then by some, you know, by some kind of providence, you're the one who ran into the money and picked it. Even though at that time you associated the prayers that your mother had as to the reason why you're the one who found the money, but eventually you were able to demystify and understand why that money was there. It brings me to talking about your grandfather's curse. You know, do you believe in curses? And
no.
If you do, no. Right.
No.
Right. Why do you think that the curse that was placed on your grandfather by your granduncles, I believe, why would you think that your family would have thought that is the reason why there was misfortune that befell your family? And so your brother, your older brother, was in a hurry to pay back whatever he thought that you guys owed your uncles for taking care of you, for playing taking the role of, so to speak, what your father should have been doing. So in your book, you did mention why your older brother had to quickly pay off whatever he thought that your family owed your uncles.
You know, the biggest issue in Africa is all about control. If you look, I always say the reason for African poverty is to do with 3 things. 1 is religion. 2 is political. 3 is cultural. All 3 of them is meant to control our minds as Africans, so that we don't break free. So in terms of my uncles, you see, if you grow up with your uncles, means you owe them for everything. And of course, in life, if you're a Christian and you believe that there will be miracles, chances are good that if you really, really think hard about the miracles, you might have a dream about those miracles. That does not mean it might come true, you know, because your mind gets preoccupied and something somewhere might happen. Whatever. The same thing as a curse. We've seen people that, I remember there was a story where it was told about in West Africa about one of the child who was actually being cursed by one of his uncles to say that because he was being disobedient. And actually, and he said that you will die at 12 o'clock tomorrow. And then, of course, 12 o'clock, the child died. The reason he died because not because the curse, because he believes in it. So if he believes in something, to believe is a powerful tool. And we are taught those curses. If you believe that those curses will happen, unfortunately, that your mind can play tricks with you, and they might happen for real. Whether car accidents, whether misfortune, or whatsoever it is. And in my mind, I refuse to believe that somebody will sit on the dark and curse me. Let them try, because it won't happen. Because I don't believe in those nonsense at all. So these curses is something that been in African tradition for generation to generations. And I remember once I read a book when we were at primary school, and the book was written in Nigeria. The title was The Great Pond. I don't know whether you read about it, Pond, where the two tribes were fighting for water. But all got all this kind of African kind of tradition. And people believe in those kind of things, and they're not real. It's just a matter of that you want to control someone else's mind. And I think the curse from my uncles, of course, when we're taught that story, and now I grew up with the uncles, means I'm supposed to be obedient for whatever my uncles ask of me. If they say I need money, you say how much. If they say I need that, and that's nonsense, because they want to control you. And I think for me, it didn't make sense. So even as a Christianity, yes, I pray to God, but God does not say that the priest must control me. No, the priest is not going to control me. It's my direct relation between me and my God. It got nothing to do with it. There's no middleman. God did not appoint a middleman to make a deal between me and him. I make my deal with my Lord. Finish. And the middleman, who is a priest, that's his own problem. He cannot use me to pay tithe or other things to make his life. So I think for me, the story of my uncle was to tell people that, listen, I think you've been misled. Those are curses that were put in, and those Amen tells you about education. But I've seen in South Africa, even people that are educated, when they're sick, they still go to traditional healer first before they even go to a doctor. I mean, in South Africa, people with PhD. So I don't know what is it. Is it our mind? Is it education or whatever? I don't know. But people are still obsessed with that. But I know that most people like yourself who have managed to take those beliefs out of their system, they succeed. And most of the time, society in Africa might not like you. The reason is because you're thinking like Westerners. And that means you're no longer Africans. But I don't know what's meant to be an African. Does that mean that you have to believe in things that does not make sense? No.
Absolutely, profoundly said. I'm going to take quick reads from Facebook and YouTube. First, Glory Grace Shannon says, Dr. Taban is very right. People tend to misuse alcohol, then blame their acts on it. Theodora Igwe watching from YouTube says, very true. Destroy education so the people only know what you tell them, just like what Hitler did in Germany, repeating itself in Africa. Chantel Payel says, depriving kids education, taking away their dignity. And Chikas Kumli said, education is a basic human right. Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel Taban. And of course, WSR1.tv says, exactly, senior brother, senior sister control mechanism to some extent through intimidation by believing passionately in something that still don't exist. We create it. That is true. That's the power of the mind there. If you believe that a curse will work, does have power on you, somebody curses you, especially if you're guilty, you've offended them, of course.
Exactly.
The chances are the curse will take effect on you.
On you, yes.
So I want to ask again, Dr. Taban, at St. Joseph, the well-off kids came to school with butter and bread and jam, and you had none of that. But you mentioned that you never even you never envied them because they could come to school with bread and butter and jam. What you did wish for, though, is that you had a father Because until that moment, it didn't occur to you how fatherless a child you were.
Yeah, I think I always say, the issue that having a both parents in your life is very important, whether they're rich or poor. But having that father in the house, it creates kind of stability and kind of foundation to that household.
Mm.
And always, I think as a boy, you will learn a lot from your father and your mother. You will learn quite a lot. And I didn't have that because the people that were close to me are my uncles, but they resented us in their house anyway. They never liked us because they never seen them as their own children. And I remember once even I went to my own uncle, who is my father's brother, but he want nothing to do with me. So now for me, it hurts me a lot because when you go and play with the children and you find that now the fathers can pick them up and you are walking your own way alone with none of your parents because you got none. And that for me was very painful. And I think there's no child actually should be deprived of their parents, irrespective whether you are divorced or not. If you're divorced, it's fine, but there's nothing prevent you as a father to get involved in your child's lives because that child carrying a genetic materials for both of you. So it requires both of you, irrespective of whether you're together or not. You have to give that child the best because that child did not choose to come to this world. You guys brought the child to this world. So you need to give that child the best. And every child deserves a parent. And I think for me, that was the moment that I felt it that way. It's not because I wanted to have a car, I wanted people to give me food and all those. No, I just needed to have a father who could come to my parents' day and hold my hand and say, well done, my boy. I didn't have that. And up to today, until I met my guardian, of course, who was proud of me.
The power of having someone believing in you as a young child makes all the difference in life.
Yes.
You also talked about how you were bullied at school. First of all, the point where you went back to living with your uncle in the same compound and they treated your mother poorly simply because she had a husband that is still alive. But there was a sister-in-law of your mother who everyone had pity on and treated better simply because her husband was dead. He was late. So they treated her better. But your mother, who is a sibling to them, what didn't get equal treatment because as far as they're concerned, your husband is alive and well there, somewhere out there. He should be responsible for you and your kids. How did that make you feel when in the mornings you're going to school with your cousins who go to probably the same school as you, but then
Yes.
they are allowed to go, they are driven in cars and you are left to walk from the same household to school. And then you get to school and you're bullied. And then this particular day, you stand up to this bully. You protected yourself and your cousin Yaka. I believe his name is Yaka.
Yes.
And then from then on, the bullying stopped. Take us through that phase of your life as well.
I think you see the one of the biggest issues that I think in Africa, because you see that's why there's dowry, or in South Africa they call it lobola. When the woman get married, she married out of the house, means I marry a wife to my own family. And that as my wife means me as a man, I must look after that man, after the woman.
Mm.
And the uncles only look after their own children. So now I didn't belong because my father, I belong to another household. So now, however, because of the divorce, I was fatherless. So my uncles wanted nothing to do with us because my father, with all their relatives, they're all around. They should be, ideally, they should be the one looking after us. But they were not interested in us either. And my uncles, I mean, they got great responsibility for their brothers' children. Which, I mean, that also make a bit of sense. But I mean, in my mind at this moment, currently, I'm looking after my three sisters' children They have about 14 kids. Then I'm sending them all to school. They're all just staying the same yard with me in Uganda. So obviously, I think my education level helped me to understand that a child did not choose to come to this world. As long as they're carrying my blood, whether from my sister's side or from my late brother's side, I have responsibility to guide them if the parents are not around, because you want to guide them so that they can become a better children in the future. And I think my uncles at that time, they didn't understand that meaning. So for them, we are just a burden. Going to the bully is an international problem. It's not just in South Sudan. And like any other bullies only stop when you stand up for it. If you don't stand up for it, they will bully you until to the day that you will actually end quitting school. And I've seen that. And at that moment, I mean, I know very well when my sisters were bullied by Joy's kids, my uncle wife, the late wife, they bully her. So bully was the biggest problem in South Sudan. But for me, I think because the way I grew up, I will never accept to be bullied by anyone. And at that moment, I decided that I'm gonna fight. If I fight and die there in honor, I will rather die in honor. But I would never accept someone to bully me and control my life. And I always at that moment, I want to have my own destiny, my own freedom, and nobody will tell me what to do. Let alone a child that because he's chubby, you come tell me that, listen, you must do 1, 2, 3 for him. I will never allow that. And that's why I allowed the bully for the first day. Second day, I decided I'm gonna fight him. And that was the last time that he actually even touched me again.
You know, even though it's your personal experience in on a bigger stage, I feel like this is where young African children, youths have to be, because we live on a continent where the government seem to be bullying us to succumb to ineptitudes, bullying us to shut up, never speak up, take whatever the crap it is that is shoved down our throat. And a day must come when the young people on the African continent understand how much power they have and make these governments realize that they can only keep pushing them as much as they allow them to push them, or we allow them to push us. I want to ask you, your mother had many children, but she pinned her hopes of getting your family out of poverty solely on you. Did that make you feel enormous pressure? And how did that galvanize, or how did that propel you to becoming the successful man that you have become today?
I think at the beginning, I didn't understand what it actually entailed. But only when I came to South Africa, I went to university, and looking back at all my siblings, because my elder brother, Joseph, where now currently I have his daughter, who is my niece staying with me, didn't go to school. He did kind of bit of artisanship. And then my 2 sisters never went to school. So it's only my youngest, Sarah, who actually having diploma in auditing. So you find that actually, for whatever reason, as a woman, she had instincts. And somehow she thought the prospect for me succeeding was better than the rest of the siblings. I don't know how did she reach that conclusion. I wish she was alive. She could be able to answer that. But whatever she did was, I think, probably was the right decision at that moment. And I think she given me that opportunity. And and of course, one of the biggest break was when she paid for me to be in that Catholic school. And I think it was a proper school. And that 5 years that I spent there probably made me who I am today. Because in total, I have not done 12 years of school like everybody else. I only did about 8 years in total of high school. And that's when I went to university. And that's probably tell you about potential of children in Africa. That children in Africa are gifted. They have huge potential if they are nurtured properly, guided, and skilled. this continent can change within 20 to 30 years like Singapore. But somebody need to do it. You spoke about political bullying. The issue that, I mean, if you look at the politicians in Africa, they really represent the masses. And the masses are very illiterate. And that's all that they could get, because you get what you saw. And those politicians, they are there really for their own sake. They don't understand what's entailed to grow up a country. In Africa, we don't live for tomorrow. We live for today. And that's our biggest problem. And I mean, until you find a leadership like Kagame in Rwanda, who is doing amazing things. I mean, you go to Rwanda, it's completely a different part of Africa. And hopefully, we hope that most of the countries in Africa can take aim and look at what Rwanda is doing so exceptionally. But it's going to be difficult, because for you to do what Rwanda is doing, you need to believe in your population and the children at large. Means you need to invest on those children, educate them and skill them and guide them to become a better children. But the problem in Africa is that people like you, Suzanne, if you're brought in Africa, you're going to be too critical. An African politician doesn't like to be criticized. They wanted people who wanted handouts. They wanted people who agree with them. And they wanted people that are dependent on them. And that's our biggest problem. So if you have to succeed as African, you must eliminate the element of dependency and bring people that are free thinkers. Because if you take an African today, put it in England, he does very well. You put him in USA, he does very well. Bring him to Africa, he's finished. Why? What are we doing in Africa that results in our people not progressing? What is that wrong that we're doing in Africa? Because for me, African elites that are all over the Europe, they use African as a graveyard. That's all. They all come and get buried in Africa, but they never develop the continent. They never insist on proper leadership. And if they do, they sometimes get killed before even they do anything, unfortunately.
Right. Let me take quick reads from Chantel Pael says, absent fathers are one of the key contributory to many social contributors to the many social ills we face in our continent. Absentee fathers. And she still goes ahead to say, those who do not follow the status quo will always face trials and tribulations. Thank you, Dr. Taban, she says. And Chikas Kumli says, potentials lying dormant because of insufficient opportunities and privileges. We need to fix Africa's leadership by fixing our politics. And Arena Nipe, or Nipe, pardon me, says, Dr. Taban for president. I know you're not going to go there.
I'm a pulmonologist.
Yes. So I'll ask you one more question. Then I will go into, asking you a final question. In your book, Life and Death in Juba, there were times where, because of your personality, you were labeled names that was not you, and you refused to accept it. You were punished because you stood your ground. Because in African culture, a young child who refuses to acknowledge when an older person makes an allegation against you, it seemed to be insolent, disrespectful, Talk about how the cultural ways that we raise children in Africa end up molding us into adults who cannot compete favorably in the global world.
I think our biggest thing in Africa is that I think we think that a good children are children that are obedient. Unfortunately, that's not true. Children should be allowed to be children. They need to be sticking their nose everywhere. We need to accept that. And that's how research is all born about. People in doing researches are people that actually they take risk. Okay, so children need to be guided. So in Africa, I mean, if you grow up in a household that is not yours, if you've been blamed for anything, you're supposed to accept it, whether you're right or wrong. You're not even supposed to allowed to argue your point. And I think for me, I have issues with that. I have daughters. We sit in a table and you always saying, I always want to see the argument. I would always ask them, you did this wrong. What do you have to answer it? Give me, justify for me your part. Why you think you're wrong? And they will say, they're afraid. I said, no, don't be afraid. Tell me, justify it. Why did you do it? And then you correct them accordingly. You must allow children to be free in the way they think. They should be talking freely. And you need to guide them, because otherwise you're going to have children that are very obedient. And if they're going to be obedient, then I mean, what kind of kids you're going to have? Because you're going to have, I mean, then all of them will become, I always saying that they're going to become like people that like soldiers. They only act if the general say you shoot. If you don't shoot, they stick there and they're going to get killed. And that's for me is really not necessary. And I think we need to allow children to be children. They must have a free will to think. They need to be able to be encouraged to start doing research and thinking about and speak freely. And I think for me, as if we go to the West, children are free. I mean, they're obedient kids, but at the same time, they need to be corrected. I mean, when do they learn to be saying certain kind of things? Because the moment you tell them, don't do 1, 2, 3, as a child, I'm going to say, okay, you don't want me to do that. Why? What is that important? It makes me more want to do it, actually. But if you give me all the options, then I see them, then chances are good that, yes, I will understand why you don't want me to do that. So I needed to learn. And that's why the adults are there to guide us, but not to act like a dictator saying, you can't do 1, 2, 3. No, you can't. I can do it. Why you say I cannot do it? And that's probably the reason I end doing bronchoscopy, because, I mean, when the World Health Organization say that no bronchoscopy in patient COVID-19, for me was, okay, give me the evidence. And when I looked, there was no evidence. And that's when I end doing bronchoscopy and then find that there's mucus plug on those patients. So the question that if I didn't go and breach those rules and do the bronchoscopy, then I would not have learned. So for me is that I think we must allow people to be able to take risks. It's very important. Africa is a rich continent, but we wanted a free thinkers, a free people, innovative people that will come with the fresh ideas. And anything that is fresh, unfortunately, not everybody will agree with you. So you must allow them to be who they are. And for me, kids in Africa, they're extremely very intelligent. We just need to nurture them properly and give them that free will, and promise you 20, 30 years, Africa will be a different continent.
Thank you. There was a question by a viewer from YouTube, Theodora Igwe. I left that question because I wanted to ask you this question later on in our conversation. As we round up, you made mention about allowing children to be free thinkers, to think for themselves, to make decisions, to be curious in essence. And so even when the WHO didn't advise that people should try to figure out certain things concerning this COVID and so on, you went ahead to make your own, you did what you had to do. And then in as a result of that, you have not lost a single patient to COVID-19. Theodore Igwe says, I should ask you, please, at some point in the broadcast, can you ask Dr. Taban what he thinks about vaccine production on the continent of Africa? By the way, I saw, sorry, before you answer that, I saw that you took your COVID vaccine a few days ago. So when you responded to Theodora's talk, I want you to also talk to us about the brand of vaccine you took and why you chose to go ahead to take this vaccine now.
All right. So, okay, very, very interesting. So vaccine production in Africa is absolutely possible. And if you look at the person that actually was involved in production of vaccine in I think the modern vaccine in USA was an African lady, African American. So the problem with Africa is that Africans, doctors are like African engineers. They have certificates, they have degrees, but they're all in the wall. They're never in their brain. And coming back to me, World organizations, what they do, they provide guidelines. So do all other engineers or any other regulatory bodies. They provide guidelines. But the honest lie to me as a pulmonologist, the end of the day, I'm the one sitting there with the patient. I'm treating that patient. It's not the World Health Organization. If you're an engineer, you are the one to construct that road. It's not the engineering association. So in Africa, we never allowed, we never skilled our people enough to be confident, to be innovative. To produce vaccine is not difficult. It's really, really not difficult. It's just you need to have the resources and you have to have the tools to do that. Okay. And means your government have to believe in it. And you must have interest in it. And most of these things requiring few things. In Africa, we do careers because we think there's a money in those careers. We don't do careers because we are passionate about it. I do pulmonology because I was passionate about the lungs. And that's why I invested thousands of time going all over the world. I went to Europe. I went to USA. I wanted to see how can I be the best in the lungs. And for me, most Africans fail to do that. They just, once they get their degree, that's the final time that they celebrate. But they're forgetting that the degree itself, it means nothing until you learn some skill to apply what you have learned, the theoretical knowledge, and make something out of it. And I think that's where an issue. So we can be able to produce vaccine in Africa because we do have in the minds. Africans are not that stupid at all. Africans are intelligent, but we need to have peace. We need to have infrastructure. We need to have the ground to be fertile for the children to be able to become free. And we need people that can express their opinion freely without being sabotaged by politicians. We need to have that. But as long as you don't have that, we're always going to be dependent to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world, of course, Chinese, love that because they will, you know, I mean, do you know why they love it? Because they can get all our resources using our politicians. You know, they don't shoot us anymore. They just take the good African president, put in Beijing hotel. The next time, all our resources are gone. And this is our problems in Africa. Africa problems is our leadership that is a problem. But as an African, there's nothing wrong with an African. We can produce vaccine, we can manufacture cars, we can aeroplane, everything we can be able to do in Africa. But the system needs to change. We need to be able to talk freely about African problem. And means education system need to be changed. We cannot carry on with the education system that suits the West. We need to have education system that is designed to help Africa to develop Africa. Because currently our biggest issue in Africa is infrastructure and food security. So we should be focusing more of our energy with our human resources to develop food security and infrastructure in Africa. Means the railway line, the roads, you know, the electricity and all those basic things. Then allow those with a good brain to go and study. And we shouldn't be afraid to send them to Harvard, to Oxford, and they come back and then they need to start inventing things, creating things, getting experience, and manufacture vaccines. Yes, we can do the vaccines. There's nothing wrong with that. It's easy. I actually thought about it, but I need to go and study another further, but I can't do everything all by myself. You need to have somebody who is interested in vaccine. You've been spending years and years doing vaccines.
Right. And of course, let me remind you to answer the question of why you took the vaccine, what brand of vaccine you took, and why did you take it when the rest of us are worried about the side effects?
Okay, I did Johnson vaccine, and vaccines for the rest of the Africans. I took the vaccines. My wife took the vaccine too. And I want to assure all the Africans out there that all our genetic materials are not being altered. Vaccines are not the work of evil. The vaccines is protective. Vaccines is this not a new vaccine? The vaccine's been around for centuries and has saved many people, include Africans, especially from tuberculosis, things like polio, and the list is endless. So the current coronavirus vaccines, actually, it tells you about the advancement in human technology, and that's the beauty about it. And you know what make my heart sore? The fact that when coronavirus come, Europe, China, Russia, America, even Brazil was fighting to make the vaccines. What are Africans doing? They're engaged in conspiracy about vaccines. We're not contributing, we're only consuming. Until when are we gonna be like at the same level as the European and Chinese? Until when are this are we gonna be recognized? We can't be deserving for Europeans to recognize Africa. We must earn it. We must be leaders in our own field. If we're gonna talk to Europeans, we must be talking to them like we're equal. And equality means that we have to be productive in our own continent. We must improve the negativity that's associated with Africa. That must change. The war, we need to be able to protect our own women. There's so many things about Africa that actually we need to address before we actually address the rest of the world. And I think if we do that and improve our education sector and focus on our generation, our population properly, Africa can produce everything because we have the youngest population all over the world. Chinese, everywhere, they're older. We have the youngest. And for once, I want to disperse this narrative in Africa. I've been to Europe to study. Nobody has denied me knowledge. Nobody has obstructed me. So there's nothing prevent any young African who just finished university to go and pursue further studies in Europe, get more skills in China, and come back and apply those skills here. If you don't do that, in the next 10 to 20 years, all the factories, all the minings, all the construction works would be done all by Chinese. And you know what the sad reality is that Chinese men will come and stand on the road, do construction in the hot sun, but an African man go and sit under the tree, while our skin is made to withstand the sun. We should be doing those construction, not giving them to the Chinese people, because that's how we learn, and that's the way that we actually get and teaching our own generations. But so the issue that I think we have mentality problem, and sooner or later, the sooner we start speaking it and calling a snake, the better. And I think for me, it's my duty to speak frankly to the rest of the continent that listen. Though we're taking vaccines from America, from Russia, and everywhere, I hope in the next pandemic, which will come maybe in 50 years again or whatever, I hope African will be in forefront and produce the vaccines and produce medication. We have to make that a reality. But that will not happen without starting planning and make sure that the next generation 100 times better than me and you. Because if they're worse than me and you, then then Africa is doomed.
Hearing someone who is like us talk like this is more convincing than listening to someone who doesn't look like us tell us that it's okay to take the vaccine, because there have been precedents in the set before that make us suspicious. Having said that, thank you so very much. So the Johnson & Johnson one, is it an mRNA or a technology tech vaccine, or is it a vector-derived vaccine?
No, it's a vector-driven vaccine.
Oh yes, right.
Yeah, and actually, it's come out that's one of the best. It's one of the best vaccine. It's actually very safe. There's really not major side effects. You just feel a bit of headache. Some people know nothing completely, and it's very protective. And I think the sooner everybody in Africa actually get the vaccines, the better, because that at least can, because coronavirus, unfortunately, that has changed the way of our lives, in terms of the traveling, in terms of the schooling, in terms of a lot of other issues, our economy. So we need to put an end to this virus, and I hope most government in Africa will acquire the vaccine and vaccinate everybody, so that at least we can focus in developing the continent and moving forward as a continent.
Absolutely. Twinkle, I want to round up, but Twinkle Oruwariye says, Dr. Taban, please, how can many other African doctors reach you? And then he has a second question that says, how can many other doctors also start carry out this procedure to save more critical patients from dying? He has three questions. Let me let you answer the first one and the second one before I take the third one.
I think the second question is that unfortunate that you cannot ask many doctors as African doctors to do the procedure, because you need to be trained. You have to be skilled. You need to have the skills. So is pulmonologist. So you need to be trained as a pulmonologist, which take about 14 years of training. Okay, so it means you have to have passion in it. And I can't imagine that if you're a physician, it's going to be difficult. So you need to have to be trained. Otherwise, you actually cause more harm for the patients. So, but those with the skills, of course, they can be able to do them. But I just want to reiterate that not everybody with COVID-19 have mucus plugs. So it has to be a selected group of patients that could benefit from procedure, not everybody. So they need to read my paper very carefully. It's very important for that. So bronchoscopy is not the solution for all COVID patients. Okay, so the real solution for us is going to be the vaccines, actually, than that. So that's number one. Number two, I think all the doctors that can be able to access me through Google, if they Google Dr. E.M. Taban, and they will always find my name and my phone numbers and everything, include my office, include my email. So they can be able to get me by email. And most of the time I do respond to the emails. I'm also available on the LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram also. So I'm available on all the social media networks.
Right. And the third question is, Dr. Taban, you are a great man. That is not a question. That's a comment, a compliment. Dr. Taban, you are a great man. We Africans are all proud of you. You have raised up the African flag above the continent. Absolutely. And Chantel Pael says, Africans are indeed intelligent people. We need to break free from fear and be innovators. Now, my final question, more like run us through look-arounds all the way through to Central Africa, East Africa, and then South Africa. How you went from look-around, how you were able to travel through the borders of all these countries and find yourself in South Africa. And when you did finally find yourself in Europe and America, why did you not stay there like many other doctors will do? Why did you come back to Africa? So please take it away.
All right. I won't give out much about the book. The book is there. If somebody wants to know about my story, they could be able to get the book online. It's titled The Boy Who Never Gave Up, Refugee Epic Journey to Triumph. Yes, it's got all the answers that they need. Yes, but I took my journey from South Sudan at the age of 16. And of course, I took a long journey. I was in North, like in one of the Muslim school. That's when I tried to escape. On the process, I found myself in Eritrea. Eritrea, of course, I found a bit of difficulties because of language, and I couldn't get into school. That's when I decided I was going to go to Nairobi. And of course, when I went to Nairobi, I was comfortable. I met my uncle, and unfortunately, he couldn't look after me. So, and I decided, you know what, since I grew up, nobody really cares about me. Let me go somewhere far away where I can start all over again. and find my own identity. That's when I went to South Africa. Of course, I came to South Africa. I have opportunity by the Comboni missionaries who assisted me to go to school. And after finishing, went to varsity and finished university. And of course, one of the things that, yes, after finishing university, as I mentioned initially, that I've been all over the world. I have opportunities, suppose, offer a job in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and I actually written what we call USA MLA exams to work in USA, and I passed those exams. But I didn't believe for once that I was born in Africa by mistake. I was never born in Africa by mistake. Now, I am 43 years old. I'm in the mid of my life and probably almost on the height of my success, of my career. And there's huge need in Africa in all aspects. Now, if you have to run away to Europe, that probably means I'm going to give out my dignity of being an African. Unfortunately, when I go to Europe, I have to start from zero. And I have to work based on the system that they have developed. And I will never be respected. Because no matter how far you travel as an African, you will never get respect because of your continent, your background, your people. And you will always carry a stigma of being a helpless, corrupt, destructive, and lawlessness. And I believe that it's my duty as an African to create change in Africa. To create that change, that does not mean that I pick up guns and fight. The time of fighting with a gun is long gone and passed long time ago. The only way that I'll fight the war is through a pen and free speech and being excellent in what I do. So I'll fight that even though if I manage to change one child in Africa, one individual in Africa to do things differently and be good in what they do, and that will satisfy me as a person. And one of the reasons that I think for me as an African, for all these people that are listening out there, if we have a chance, we need to teach our children, our fellow Africans, that it's time, let's develop passion in our continent. Africa is a reflection. You know, when they call you African, it means you are pigment of your skin. And that pigment is a reflection of the continent that you come from. And that continent is reflect the suffering of the people that carry your pigment. So it's your duty and my duty to change the image of Africa. And we can do that if only we accepted our failures. That the reason we fail because me and you, we have not done our part. And that's the only way that we can change this continent. And yes, I will not go to Europe. I will go to pick up a skill because I want to bring the skill back to Africa. I will go attend a seminar, that's all to it. But I will not leave this country to go and live in 2-bedroom house and being told what to do and behave in a certain way. And you will never, ever be a citizen in that country because you're an African. And you always been monitored with suspicion. And for me, I have a dignity, and my dignity to remain in Africa. And I wanted to be the face of change in Africa.
Wow, profound, profound. Thank you so much, Dr. Taban. Thank you for everything you have said here, because it's like that, of course, there's no one here watching, and the people, of course, who will catch up with this broadcast, who would not understand that there have been tools made available to unshackle our minds, to free us from mental slavery. And so I just want to say, I'm lost for words. I'm lost for words. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Taban. Thank you. And so quickly, how can anyone who is interested in getting your book, The Boy Who Never Gave Up, how can they, where can they find the book? How can they purchase the book?
I think they can get the book online. They can Google www. Google it, the Boy Who Never Gave Up, and it will just pop up. You'll find it online, and most of them they do deliver. And currently, I think they're busy with the negotiating the copyright for Europe, and then also USA. So sooner or later, I think the book should be produced in most of those countries. Yeah, I think so. So the launch of the book will be on the 15th of March officially. That's going to be launched. So you're actually the first to have to read the book.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taban. You indeed have shipped out my copy to me here in London from South Africa, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, you should get it soon. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch up with you on the other side. Thank you. All right, guys. Somber moment at some point. At some point, it was just, for me, what we all need to hear on a daily basis, on a minute-by-minute basis. The call to, the call to acknowledge our identity and understand that we are not inferior to the rest of the world, and understand that it is in our power to make the rest of the world respect us, to understand that we should not let the validation of the West be the yardstick of how we appreciate and value ourselves. And to understand that regardless of the circumstances that you or we are born under or in, it should not define who we eventually become. To understanding that our fate is actually in our own hands. To understand that we can recreate and create the world that we want to see and live in by changing, just tweaking our mindsets just a little bit. To understand that manna is not going to fall from the sky, because God has given us everything that we need to succeed. To understand that prayer is powerful, but after praying, then comes the work, because manna no longer falls from the sky. Let's begin to ask ourselves why Europe, America, and even the Far East is succeeding. We are a prayerful people, highly religious people, believing in a higher power. Nothing wrong with that. But why are we the continent that is still struggling to provide for its people good education, health, infrastructural development? Why are we a people stuck in the Stone Ages thinking that when a man of God or some spiritual authority says something concerning us, and that's all it takes for us to succeed or fail? We can begin to break those chains, unshackle ourselves from that thinking, in understanding that The same sun and rain that pours on the unbelievers, the believers is the same rain and sun that shines on the unbelievers. There is a rule that applies in this realm, and that rule is that we will reap what we sow. Therefore, regardless of how much prayer we put out into the universe, into the heavens, no matter how much prayer we send into the spirit world, when we do not take our fate in our own hands and begin to put the works to it, we will not see the desired change. We will only continue to jump from one spiritual house to another, one pastor to another, to keep praying. If we can be honest and ask ourselves these salient questions: for how long have you prayed? How much changes have you seen? But when you did pray and then you did get up and put works to that prayer, did you manifest any changes? Did you see any kind of progression, forward moving progression or movement? So we are at that point where we, and only we, can emancipate ourselves from these shackles that we find ourselves. It is time to stop blaming everyone else but ourselves. And on that note, I just want to say a very big thank you to everyone who joined us on this broadcast. It is Africa Rise with Susan West. If you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to our channels, please do so. It is Africa Rise TV on YouTube, Africa_Rise.tv on Instagram, SWOB21, SWOB21 on Facebook. And of course, in our usual manner, as we go into the week, I will be announcing who our next guest is going to be. Thank you for joining. Share this broadcast even after we have come off live. Thank you. I love you all, and God bless you. Bye-bye.